In this video, I'm going to work through some examples that involve exponents and order of operations. So let's start with the problem 2/3 to the second power. So the rule is that when a fraction is being raised to a power, that the numerator gets raised to that power and the denominator. So in this case, 2/3 to the second power would be 2 to the second in the numerator, 3 to the second in the denominator. So you can almost think of distributing the exponents to both the top and the bottom of the fraction. And then you just simplify this in two different steps. So simplify the numerator separately, so 2 to the second is 4, and then simplify the denominator separately, so 3 to the second is 9. And then check to make sure that it's reduced, which 4/9 is, so there's your answer. Alright, let's try another one. Let's try 3/4 to the fourth power. Okay, so again, we see that a fraction is being raised to the fourth power. So the numerator gets raised to the fourth and the denominator. So I'm going to rewrite this as 3 to the fourth over 4 to the fourth. And then just simplify the numerators. So 3 to the fourth is 81. Simplify the denominator. So 4 to the fourth is 256. Check, make sure it's reduced, which it is. So there's my answer. Okay, now let's look at some problems that involve exponents and negative signs. So let's look at -5 to the second power. Now it could look like that, where the -5 is in parentheses, or there might not be parentheses. So it might just be like that. So let's start with the one with parentheses. So when you see parentheses, okay, parentheses are a grouping symbol. So that is saying that this entire quantity, -5, is being squared. So that's really like -5 times -5, and a negative times a negative is a positive. Now, when you're also doing that in your calculator, make sure you put in the parentheses because you want your calculator to look exactly like it looks on the paper. Okay, now the second one here, when you don't see the parentheses, then the number that's being squared is just the 5, not with the negative sign. So it almost is like the negative is just hanging out front. And then you're going to think, okay, 5 to the second power is 25, so your final answer is -25. Okay, so almost, if it helps, kind of just block out that negative sign. So you're really just looking at, okay, what's being raised to the power, so what's directly attached to that exponent. And then your answer will just bring that negative sign down with it. When you do this on your calculator, you're not going to put parentheses. So you're going to type it in, again, exactly how you see it. Negative, hit 5, hit the squared button, hit enter, and then your calculator should give you the negative sign as your answer as well. Now let's do some more with negatives. Oops, let me get a pen here. And some odd exponents. So for example, what if we have -4 to the third power? Okay, so we have it with the parentheses and without the parentheses. Okay, so let's look at the one with parentheses first. So again, the parentheses are grouping together the negative and the 4. So that entire number, -4, is being raised to the third power, which means it's being multiplied together 3 times. And then, this is just a matter of multiplying numbers. So -4 times -4 times -4 is -64. Okay, because a negative times a negative here is positive, but then a positive times a negative is a negative. So your final answer is -64. Now let's look at it if it doesn't have parentheses. So just like before, you're going to kind of block out that negative sign and you're looking at what is being raised to the third power. It's just the 4. And then the negative sign out front is just going to come down to your final answer. So it's like negative and then 4 to the third, 4 times 4 times 4, which is 64, and then that negative sign comes down with it. So notice in this one, whether you have parentheses or not, your answer is negative 64. And that's because that exponent is odd. And it all has to do with multiplying negatives. Because remember, negative times a negative is a positive. So for every 2 negatives you have, those cancel out and becomes positive. So let's get one more so you can see how that works again. Let's try negative 2 to the 4th power. So now we have an even exponent again. Whoops. And then we're going to do one with and one without parentheses. So negative 2 to the 4th with parentheses means you're taking that number negative 2 and you're going to multiply it together 4 times. Okay? So now you can also do this on your calculator. Again, make sure you put in parentheses. But if you do this by hand, so negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. Over here we have another negative 2 times negative 2, so positive 4. 4 times 4 is 16. So our final answer is positive 16. Now the second one, so the negative sign is not in the parentheses, so it's just like doing 2 to the 4th, and then you're going to throw that negative sign out front. 2 to the 4th is 16, negative sign out front, so here your answer is negative. So notice how tricky parentheses can be. They can make your answers different signs depending on if there's parentheses or not, and it also depends on whether your exponent is even or odd. So if you're doing this on your calculator, just be careful. Make sure you put in parentheses when you see them and don't put them in if you don't see them. And if you're doing it by hand, just kind of follow how I did it here and really make sure you're careful of whether you're expanding it out with parentheses or like in the second one here, whether you're just going to ignore the negative sign to do the power and then it just goes into your answer. Okay, now let's look at some problems that involve order of operations. So I'm sure you all are familiar with PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So that reminds us that the order of operations, it goes parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Okay, so let's look at this example here. So if I start with my parentheses, in parentheses, it's your grouping symbol. So it could be parentheses, so we have one set here around the 13 plus 4, or it could also be brackets. Now notice we actually have both, so we're going to work inside and work our way out. So the inside the brackets you have parentheses. So I'm going to start with the 13 plus 4, which is 17. And I'm going to bring everything else down. Okay, it's best if you go one step at a time so you don't make any errors. And then in my brackets now, so that's my next grouping symbol, 17 minus 8, oops, is 9. Okay, and then now if we look at what operations we have 4 to the second, so there's your exponents. And then when you have a bracket, it also could look like this. You could have replaced it with parentheses. That's multiplication. Okay, so we have exponents and multiplication. So which one comes next? Exponents. So I'm going to do 4 to the second, which is 16. And then 16 times 9 is 144. So there's my answer. Alright, so let's look at another one. Let's include a fraction bar or a division symbol. Okay, when you see a problem like this, where you see that fraction bar or division, you want to almost treat it like two different problems. So I'm first going to, simplify the numerator using order of operations, simplify the denominator using order of operations. So we're going to bring it down into one final fraction. So one numerator, one denominator. Okay, so if I look at the numerator, so let's actually just do this separately over here. Okay, so do I have any parentheses? Yes. And then within the parentheses, I have 8 squared minus 4. So I have exponent and subtraction. So I'm going to do my exponent first. Okay, so 8 squared is 64. And then now subtraction. So 64 minus 4 is 60. Okay. Then now if I look at what operations I have 8 plus 2 times 60. So I have multiplication and then addition. So I'm going to multiply first 2 times 60, which is 120. And then add that together, so 128. So that was my numerator. Okay. My denominator, and I'll clean this all up in a second here. So we have 4 times 3 minus 10. So this one I only have 2 operations. I have multiplication and then subtraction. And so I go multiplication first and then subtraction, so just go in order here. So 4 times 3 is 12. 12 minus 10 is 2. Okay? So I'm going to go back to the original problem over here. My numerator simplified to 128. My denominator simplified to 2. And then 128 divided by 2 is what, 64? So there's my answer. Alright, let's try one more. This one's going to be a tough one. So I'm going to have fractions in here. I have parentheses. I have exponents, brackets. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I see I have brackets. Those are my grouping symbols. So I'm going to start inside the brackets. Okay. So I'm just going to bring that 6 down. And then in the brackets, I have over here 8 times 1/2 to the 3rd power. So that exponent 1/2 to the 3rd power is going to be my next step. Okay. Now 1/2 to the 3rd power, I'm going to do this off to the side here. We go back and remember the rule about exponents. The numerator gets raised to the 3rd power and the denominator gets raised to the 3rd power. So 1 to the 3rd is just 1 and 2 to the 3rd is 8. So 1/2 to the 3rd power is 1/8. So I can replace that back down in the problem there. Okay, so you see how that 1/2 to the 3rd power, that became 1/8. Alright, then let me go to my next step. So I'm still working in the brackets. Next is going to be multiplication, 8 times 1/8. Now when you multiply fractions, think of it as 8 over 1 times 1 over 8. You can just multiply straight across, top and bottom, 8 over 8, which equals 1. So that's easy, that's just 1. And then next I have inside the brackets adding 3/4 plus 1. Now you can just put it together and make it 1 3/4. Or, off to the side here, I'm going to change 1 to 4 over 4. Because remember, when you add fractions, you need that common denominator. And then you just add the numerators. So it'd be 7/4. And the reason I'm going to change it to 7/4 is because now when I multiply 6 times 7/4, again, I'm going to go off to the right here. This is where all my work is. When you multiply fractions, if I can turn that 6 into just 6 over 1, and then I multiply across the numerator, multiply across the denominator, so it's 42 over 4. And then I can reduce, let's see, I can divide each by 2, so that's 21 over 2. So my final answer is 21/2. And you can just leave it an improper fraction, or you can change it to, what is that, 10.5? Either or. See, that wasn't so bad, right?